Hey everybody, today's got a magic number, 150. Now get this, today is our 150th episode, and if you've been here the entire time, it really is because of you that we're still here. So, a really big-hearted thank you to all of you. Now, in today's episode, Dr. Rebecca Lewison joins me. Now, she's a conservation ecologist, she's a professor at San Diego State University, and she's a co-chair of IUCN HIPPOS Specialist Groups. Now, that's hippo as in hippopotamus. Now, she's a world-renowned expert on everything hippos, and today's episode is pretty wild, literally and figuratively. Hippos, as I'm sure you know, they're from Africa, but did you know there's actually hippos in Colombia? Now, you remember Pablo Escobar? Well, while he was alive, he decided he wanted a zoo. I mean, every drug dealer should have a zoo, right? Anyways, after he died in 1993, homes were found for all the other animals, except, you guessed it, the hippos. What started as 4 hippos is now estimated to be over 200. Now, these cocaine hippos, they're invasive. They're not quite rabbits, but they multiply pretty fast. And the Colombians, scientists, and people all over the world are trying to figure out what to do with them. Now, we're going to get into everything hippo. Also, what people are trying to do and the dilemma that they're in. Now, maybe, just maybe, after hearing the whole story, you can come up with a solution. Now, wouldn't that be pretty cool? And even more cool, at the end of the episode, 2 amazing comedians join me, Peyton and Naomi Lewis. And their jokes, the precision they tell them, well, it's an absolute don't miss. So get ready to meet Dr. Rebecca Lewinson and these 2 really fantastic comedians, Peyton and Naomi, and I promise you, you're all going to be, you're ready, happy as a hippo.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today we have a real special treat. I have Dr. Rebecca Lewison on, but he also, towards the end of the show, we're going to have some real famous comedians to tell some really cool jokes. Becca, welcome to the show, and I can't wait to get going.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So I know we're going to talk about the river horses, but I want to start with you and kind of talk about your background, how you got to where you're doing, and of course we're going to get into the Colombia stuff and all that, but let's talk about you so everybody gets to know you. So you go wherever you want to go.
Sure. I'm a professor at San Diego State University in the biology department, and I started there in 2006. So someone who's been in San Diego for a long time. But before that, I was working in East Africa, in Tanzania, studying hippos. And I kind of fell into it. But I always knew growing up, I was a science dork. That was my thing. I loved science. I actually thought maybe I was going to go into neurobiology when I was in college. And then my junior year, I took this opportunity, which hopefully everybody does, to study abroad. So I studied in Kenya, and then I realized, oh, wait, ecology is actually the thing that totally floats my boat. And so I shifted gears just a little bit from studying biology to ecology, which is the study of the environment and animals and plants and everything that lives together in nature. And from there, because I had worked in East Africa, because I learned Swahili and I traveled in East Africa, I had this opportunity to go to grad school at UC Davis and work with someone who was starting a new field site in southwestern Tanzania, which is a pretty remote part of Tanzania. It's about 2 days away from paved roads, so it takes a while to get there. But it was a park called Katavi National Park, and one of the things that Katavi was famous for was hippos. And I was looking for a way to make a contribution to science and ecology and conservation. And hippos really don't have a lot of, there's so much we don't know. And so it was so exciting to get this opportunity as a graduate student. And from there, I just became one of the world's experts in hippos, in part because there aren't a lot of people that study them, but because I had really spent so much time in the field and learned everything I could about hippos. And actually, one of the things that was really exciting to read is I went back and read all of these accounts of travelers from the 1800s and 1900s who actually recorded a lot about hippos, but it was sort of outside of what a lot of people were reading. So that was a great way to dig in as well to the research.
You know, it's funny, when I was doing my homework, so the earliest time that they have recorded is like 440 BC.
Yeah.
But they didn't get named until 1748, which is crazy. That's wild.
And because if you look in Egypt, there's all this pictures of pillars with hippos. So that's like 7,000, a long 7,000 years ago. But it took a long time, I think, for people to understand what they were. And in part that the name, their Latin name, river horse, really shows that like we didn't really understand that much about hippos kind of from the beginning.
A couple things that I read, and because I love digging into like the old myths and stuff. So the Egyptians, from the males were I guess a sign of chaos, and the females were motherhood, protecting motherhood and fertility and stuff like that, which is really cool. And then the other thing I saw, Aristotle wrote about them, which is wild.
I am not an expert in that, but I have also read about that as well. I mean, so what we know is that hippos have been around as long as, we've been recording things, even before we had words and we were just using pictures. Hippos are part of our story. So in that sense, it's kind of amazing that we don't know that much about them.
Yeah. Well, I think the more I do the podcast and the more I talk to experts like yourself, is how much it's amazing to me how much we really don't know about the animal world. It's just wild.
Yeah, because it's all around, right? I mean,
Yeah,
obviously we have incredible animals here, but if we think about African animals, they are so integral even to those of us who don't live there. Hippos are one of the most recognizable animals, and yet they, as I like to say, they're sort of hiding in plain sight because we see them, and yet it's so hard to study them because of where they live in the water. There's so much so much about their internal anatomy is different than we expect externally, like their behaviors different than we'd expect for something that big. So they're incredible. Obviously, I'm a fan.
So I've spent a lot of time in Kenya, and I've actually spent some time, I'm going to say Tanzania, like they say, but I know a little bit of Swahili too. I think I told you I've got a children's book that I wrote, and I use Swahili names. One of my favorite words, and this is going to make me sound cool because I know it, but my favorite words is Punda Malaya. And so that's, for you guys listening, that's the word for zebra. But if you go to Kenya, the zebras are everywhere. For us, it's like seeing deer here in Texas, right? And the reason why they named it's really donkey with stripes, because they see so many of them. But I just think it's the funniest word ever. It's Punda Malaya. So it's such a great name.
Yeah. Well, the Swahili word for hippo is kiboko.
Right.
In case anybody wanted to know that. I'm not sure what you do with that piece of information, but and there, one of the things that I find when I was working there and telling people about what they do, one of the things that was confusing to folks, a little bit like zebra, is when you see hippos in a particular place, particularly Eastern and Southern Africa. There's a lot of them.
Right.
So they're locally abundant. And so when I would tell people, I'm here to study hippos and, we're concerned about I'm concerned about their conservation.
Right.
People would look at me like I was crazy because they would say, like, look behind you. Do you see how many hippos are there? But it's hard to see if you only live in a particular area and you don't have a larger, geographical sort of vision around that, is that while that's true, they are locally abundant, like where I worked in Kitavi National Park,
right.
But across their range, they're losing habitat. They're losing ground. So their populations are declining, but it's not something that you would know unless you somehow knew that.
Yeah, you wouldn't know unless you knew.
Right, yeah.
Because I've been to the Masai Mara, which they say Mara over there, and I've been with the river, and I've got some pictures. It's on an old iPad. I'm trying to download because I'm going to send it to you. So I think it's a cool picture. But I remember we got out of the car and went down kind of to the water, and you don't realize they start moving to you. You go back to the car because they're faster than humans. They're so big, but they're fast.
They are very surprisingly agile in the water and out.
Right.
Yeah.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
So let's talk hippos. Let's talk. There's two different kinds. I'm going to let you go. You be the science teacher today.
Sure.
And I guarantee you, as crazy as I am, I'm going to have a bunch of different questions. But let's just go.
I love it. Well, there's two different species of hippos that we have. So we have the common hippo. And I know people here like common, there must be a lot of them, but that's just their name, the common hippo. They are increasingly less common. We think there's about somewhere between 150 and 300,000 across a lot of states. So basically sub-Saharan Africa all the way down.
Okay.
There are hippos in West Africa, although common hippos, they are much, much less abundant there. So that's an area that we have real concerns about common hippos are. And then the strongholds for common hippos are East Africa and Southern Africa. So we were just talking about Kenya and Tanzania. Zimbabwe has South Africa. Botswana has a lot of common hippos. So that's the big one. So when most people think about hippos, that's what they're talking about is common hippos. They're huge, right? 2,000, 3,000 pounds. Really, really big. There is another species of hippo, which is called the pygmy hippo. That's only in West Africa, has a much, much restricted range than common hippos. And they are, in fact, not just smaller versions. They diverged a long time ago evolutionarily. So,
and now I want to go there because I'm fascinating. I'm sorry to interrupt. By the way, I have to apologize. I say this every time. I interrupt all the time because my brain
no,
goes
I
too
love
fast.
it. Me too. That's a good conversation.
I'm just one of those people.
Totally.
So, when you look at the comparison in size, like the heaviest is like, and the common one's like 9,000 pounds or whatever it is.
Huge.
The pygmy one is like 500 or 600 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't even know how they become hippos because even their Greek name or whatever is completely different than the other one. And how are they related? Because they don't look, their face looks the same, but the rest of it doesn't really sound the same to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we know they diverged a long time ago, that difference. And so hippos, we know, came like just their ancestors for both of those species, like 9 million years ago is our best guess. So it was a good time to be a grazer at the 9 million years ago. So that's the Miocene, if anybody knows about geologic time. And that's when, it was a great time to be a grazing animal because grasslands were everywhere. And that's kind of when hippos look to be a little more similar, but they, in fact, common hippos and pygmy hippos diverge a long time ago. And so even though they share many physiological features, they are quite different from each other. And so when I say physiological features, what do I mean? I mean that, there's things you'd recognize. They both kind of look like gray oblong shapes. Yeah. They have some similar features, but in fact, there's a lot of things that are really different about them. So common hippos are more closely related to whales.
Right.
And they have that, if you have seen common hippos, whether you've been lucky enough to see them in person, but you've probably seen them on a wildlife show or TV, you know that they spend almost all of their daytime hours in water. And that's not just because they love to swim, because in fact, they can't swim, but it's because they have evolved all these adaptations to live in the water, kind of like a whale does, like marine mammals do. They have blowholes on their nose that close up when they go underwater because they're not breathing underwater, just like whales. They have structures in their head to communicate underwater, just like when you think of dolphins, they have those too. Mm-hmm. So they communicate on in the air, but they also communicate underwater. And then all these internal structures, similar to what we see with marine mammals. Pygmy hippos never had that lineage. So they are terrestrial, although they follow waterways. They don't spend their time in the water. They don't have a lot of those shared physiological features. They don't have those blowhole noses. When you see hippos, when they come up for air, there's a poof, which looks a lot like when you see a dolphin coming up for air. That's just on common hippos. So pygmy hippos, of course, are associated with water, like in the sense that they follow waterways, but they live in the forest. They are forest dwellers, deep in, unfortunately, a forest complex that used to go across most of West Africa, but now is only in Guinea, Liberia, Ivory Coast, and Sierra Leone. And that's just because of habitat loss.
Right. Well, and the Chinese building roads down there. And the Chinese building the roads.
I mean, it's a lot of, people have to live. And so we often use fresh water and we use trees. And so that big forest complex that was in West Africa is very, very fragmented. There's not a lot of it left. And so for pygmy hippos, there's only about 2,000 or 3,000 left. So they are critically endangered. That's probably something that I didn't say before. So that's a really, really serious conservation issue that doesn't get anywhere near enough attention just because they're so secretive, so elusive. We've only gotten the first picture of them on remote cameras in the last handful of years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know you're a co-chair on IUCN. Tell everybody what that is and what you guys are doing with that, because I want to get into the stories in that. But I was sitting there thinking about all this stuff when you're talking about endangered and vulnerable and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So IUCN stands for the International Union of for Conservation of Nature. It's the only truly global international organization that works to conserve nature and people and and support sustainability. Because again, we want animals and we want to support nature, but we recognize this is our Earth too. There's only one. And so when we talk about sustainability for animals, it's also about sustainability for people. So the Hippo Specialist Group is one of hundreds of groups that supports particular animals. And yes, for a long time, I've been a co-chair of the Hippo Specialist Group. So we work globally with the Global Conservation Network, governments, other nonprofit organizations, conservation organizations to ensure the long-term survival of pygmy and common hippos. And again, what that means is we're supporting sustainability for hippos and for people across their range. And their range, as we'll talk about before, is only in Africa, even though there are hippos right now in South America. That is not their native range. Hippos are only found now on the continent, on Africa.
So one of the things that I like that IUCN does, and most people don't recognize, if we're just going to talk about Africa, I know it goes between 48 to 52 countries. I know it depends on what war's going on at the time. One of the things that people don't realize is there's different politics in each country. So when you're doing that, you're having to adjust when you're trying to do conservation and protect animals. You're having to do different things for each country, correct?
Absolutely. I know when I got into, what fueled my fire to get into hippo conservation and ecology in general was, of course, nature. I was really excited about. But of course, as soon as you dive in, what you realize is, oh, yes, that's true. And this is really a lot about people. Because if people are not stewards of the environment, of animals, of sustainable living, then we don't really have a chance of protecting any animals.
Right.
And so it has a lot to do with policies, and it also has a lot to do with governance. Two things that tend to put people to sleep. And it wasn't necessarily even my spark that really focused, my passion about my, what I do in my job, but it absolutely has everything to do with conservation and sustainability, again, for people and animals. It's a lot about policies, but then of course it's great to have what do I mean policies? It's great to have a law or a regulation, but then that also has to be implemented. And so we have a lot of, sometimes you'll hear the term paper parks. And what that means is, there was a national park established in an area, which you think like, hooray,
right. That's
protecting nature and protecting space for animals. But if it's not implemented, if it's not a real park, if it doesn't come along with, compliance and implementation of those laws, that's why we sometimes use that word paper park or paper policy.
So let's go back to the hippos. I have a gazillion questions. I want to debunk some stuff. So I know one of the things they talk about, and I know what it is because I've done the homework, but is the hippos sweat blood. Let's go to that one. And I had no idea. I've never heard about that until I did my homework. It's wild.
Yeah. So this is something that there's a couple sort of like things that people say, everybody knows that about hippos. That one is one of them, how dangerous they are, that they kill more people than anybody else. And I will say that I think you use the word debunk, and that's right, because neither of those things are true. So they do not sweat blood, but they do secrete something subdermally. Under their first layer of skin. Right. And that secretion is something that's actually been studied and sort of analyzed chemically to see what it is. It is not blood. And what it seems to be, and again, when we talk about this secretion, this is on common hippos, on the really big one that we see.
Not those little midget guys.
Not the pygmy hippos that live in the forest. And actually, this makes sense. Like, why wouldn't pygmy hippos do it? Well, pygmy hippos aren't exposed to the sun.
Right.
Common hippos are exposed to the sun all the time, and it's one of the reasons that they live in the water is to thermoregulate, to protect their bodies from the heat. That secretion, what people have, this is an academic lab that has analyzed it chemically. What that seems to be is a sunscreen, which hippos are smart. We all need to be wearing sunscreen and protect our skin, and a type of antimicrobial, antibacterial. So it's actually a part of their protective layer that they secrete that happens to be pink or red, and that's why that started of their sweating blood, but it's not blood.
So they're doing sunscreen every day. Is that why they don't have any wrinkles too?
They age extremely well. It could also be they're in the water.
Yeah, like 18 hours a day.
Yeah. So hippos are mostly in the water all the time. You will see sometimes when it's cloudier or cooler that they will come out during the day to eat, but they don't eat in the water. So in the water, they are being social. So there's a lot of social interactions we can't see. They're communicating. We talked about that under the water and in the air. And so they have I think what we believe is like a lot of social relationships. We still don't really understand hippo communication. It's actually hard to capture hippo communication, and underwater microphones haven't worked as well, in part because hippos tend to be more aggressive in the water. So they don't want anybody in there with them other than other hippos, but they come out at night to forage. And so what does that mean? They find grass. They're grazers. So hippos are like amazing lawnmowers, and they follow these very established paths from rivers and lakes where they spend the day. And at night, when it's cool and the sun's not out and they don't have to worry about getting any sun damage, is when they eat the grass.
So they're herbivores, and here's a question. I dug up some article that they found that occasionally they're eating some meat now, and they're doing a study on that. What's that?
Yeah, it is a weird thing that I think it has been recorded a number of times in a number of places. So there's something there. We don't really understand what. What are the hippos doing? We know that physiologically they are built to be herbivores. They have the stomach of an herbivore. They process
Like a
food.
cow.
Yeah, just like a cow. They have multiple, like actually anybody wants to know innards of hippos. They have multiple stomachs just like a cow does.
Oh, wow.
They don't chew their cud in the same way, but any cow enthusiasts on here will know about that, about cow stomachs. So they're built to be herbivores. And yet there are some weird accounts of hippos doing something with carcasses, and it seems like they're consuming them. We don't really understand what it is. What I can say is I know that those accounts are real, so they're not fake, but I would say that mystery has not really been uncovered. So what they're actually doing is not clear. It's clear, though, that whatever those things are, they're very rare because people have been watching hippos for decades, and there's still just a handful of accounts where this has happened. One thing we think is that possibly maybe they're eating the stomach contents of the thing that died. So it wasn't that hippos actually killed the thing, but they're scavenging. Maybe.
Yeah.
Again. But it's a weird thing that I don't think features very prominently in their lives.
Well, I love weird things anyways, but
I know. Yeah.
Did I don't know if you saw, I did an episode just recently on ground squirrels that they found out that they're actually eating, they're carnivores too, that people had known it for years, but it really hadn't been documented until like 10 or 15 years ago. It's wild.
Yeah. I mean, animals are opportunistic, right? They have to be to survive. And so it could be that could have something to do with nutrients. It could have something to do with like an iron deficiency, right? Who doesn't feel it? So even though we know they're herbivores and that's how they live, every now and then, like very, very rarely, they've been noted to be consuming some part of an animal, and we still don't really understand what that's about. But I just want everyone to understand that hippos are herbivores, and even though they may do this very rare behavior now and then, that doesn't change. That doesn't change that fact.
The rule. Exception to the rule.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I read about them, which I thought was really cool, is that when they're nursing, the babies do it in the underwater.
They do. Yep.
That's crazy.
Think amazing things about hippos that make them more amazing than you could ever imagine. Hippos
You don't like them at all, do you? You don't like them at all.
I know. I have no excitement about this whatsoever. Hippos don't swim. Now, they walk under the water and they kind of like bounce off the bottom and glide.
Yeah.
Now, the one exception to that is that baby hippos are born in the water. And I've been lucky enough to actually see a hippo birth.
Wow,
get some pretty incredible pictures. Yeah, that was not something you plan for. You're just like, wait, what's happening?
That's cool.
And then you're like, oh, wait, there's hooves coming out of that large female hippo.
Yeah.
And it's a baby hippo. So it happens in the water. When the baby's born, it's about the size of a pig. They can't swim, but they are kind of like doggy paddling, so you can see them moving them.
Well, that's kind of how I swim.
Yeah, and then they rest their heads on their mums. So the mom is the raft because the moms can touch the bottom. They're big enough.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why you don't see hippos in very deep water. You tend to see them in more shallow water, and that's because the adults are fine because they go underwater and they can come up. But for babies, they have to be resting on their adult when they're very small. And so when they're not resting and they want to nurse, that's right, they have to go underwater to nurse on the mom. So
the other thing too that I thought was cool is the breast milk is actually white, which is that's unusual.
Another amazing thing about hippos. Why, you may wonder, we don't know so many things. But the fact that we know now that that link to marine mammals, to whales, that's established actually a number of different ways, but most recently through genetics. And so we know that that's a real connection.
DNA.
That's how it is with marine mammals as well. So that's another reason why we know that they're related.
I always find it interesting when you find aren't the elephants really related to whales too, I think, aren't they?
No, not in that system.
There's something that I don't know if I did an episode or something, but it was related to whales that you would never, ever imagine that they would be that.
Yeah.
For real, for real, for real, for real, for real, for real, for real.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Let's move a little bit farther. Let's talk about Colombia.
Sure.
Let's talk about Pablo Escobar's hippos, which is this amazing story. And then I want to get into the sterilization thing that we talked a little bit about. That's fascinating. I'm bound and determined to figure out how we're going to solve this. But you go there. Let's talk about the history in that. It's really cool.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the only place that hippos are supposed to be currently is in Africa. So that's both for pygmy hippos and common hippos.
Yeah.
It turns out that right now there is a very established population of common hippos in Colombia, which is in South America. So you may think to yourself, what? How? Did they swim? Did they go on a cruise? No. They were brought there in the 1970s. And there were 4 hippos that were kept in captivity as pets, basically on this big ranch of a very notorious person whose name was Pablo Escobar, who was a narco trafficker. And when Pablo Escobar was captured by law enforcement, they didn't think to themselves, oh, we should probably do something with these animals. And they left them, and they were in an enclosure in a fenced area. But when the ranch was abandoned, the hippos started leaving the ranch and roaming. And what we know about hippos, and this is actually true in their native range as well, that hippos are extremely responsive to environmental conditions. So when the environment is good, their population grows really, really quickly. The same happens when their population is bad in Africa. So they actually follow this boom-bust cycle. Well, it turns out Colombia is hippo heaven. There's water. This particular area, it's the area of the Magdalena River. There's a ton of fresh water. There's grass galore. And so from 4 hippos, what happens when you leave hippos to themselves? There was 1 male and 3 females. And so now,
one happy male.
Yeah, 1 happy male. And so now we're estimating we have around 200, and maybe estimates are somewhere in the 200 to 300s now of hippos living there in the wild in Colombia. And it's a real problem. Yeah.
Let's do a little timeline. So, because I did the homework, I'll say it. So,
yeah,
it was 81 when he decided he wanted to have the zoo, and he gets the hippos there.
Yeah,
because he was a drug dealer. He got killed in 93.
Right,
and it started with 4 hippos, and then I think it was I was doing the math. I think it was 2000 and something. They figured there was like 80 or 78 or something like that, and then now today, 15, 16, 17 years later, you're up to 200, which it's grown exponentially about 8 times that. So if you do the math, I want to get into all, they do the math, what's going to happen in 10 years is pretty crazy how big that number can be.
I know. And people think, oh, that's not possible. They couldn't possibly do that. But they really can. Again, we know this to be true about hippos, this boom-bust cycle. When the conditions are good, they become reproductively, they can have babies earlier. So they become adults sooner. They just mature faster because the conditions are good. We see the same thing in a zoo. So we know, again, this isn't like we're guessing. We know that hippos do this. And so they are thriving. And the challenge is they're not supposed to be there. And I know that it gets people very upset to think, like, what can we do with them? Like you said, there's not great solutions, but there are animals in Colombia that need to be protected, like the West Indian manatee, like the neotropical otter, like the spectacled caiman. There's so many native animals that need to be protected. The common hippo has no business being there, and they didn't ask to be there. I mean, that's the really hard part.
That's the problem, right? The humans brought them there. It's not their fault.
It's a human problem, and people really want to find them homes. They want to find captive facilities that can take them, and it's a great idea. The challenge there is just how much money that will take, and that hippos are really, really tough to anesthetize, right? You have to sedate them to be able to move them. And so it's a really, really big problem. Now, for folks who are really focused on protecting African, where they're supposed to be hippos, whether it's pygmy or common, this feels like just a terrible distraction.
Right.
Right. And it's tough. It's a really tough situation. And I wish we weren't here. I know for a long time, there was an opportunity to maybe make this right, but unfortunately that opportunity was like in the 1990s, and we can't go back in time and make better decisions.
So a couple things. One is, haven't had the opportunity to go to Africa. I know it's a little bit drier. It's not they've obviously been there for, centuries, but the reality is that when I visualize Africa and I look at the Mara, the Rift Valley and all that stuff that's there, it's still kind of arid a little bit. I know they get the rains, but they're getting less rains now. You've got humans encroaching upon them. Like you said, the deforestation, and that's for a lot of people use wood to cook on. And then you've got the Chinese are taking the wood, and you've got all the roads going there. Then you look at this perfect place, like a vacation place for these guys.
I know.
And then you kind of look at it and say, okay, well, what's the solution? The other thing is that I read is that there in Colombia, they found one that was 100 kilometers away from where they started. So they're migrating now too.
And that's the thing about hippos is that, well, one of the things we don't know about hippos is the distance they can travel, because we think of hippos as, well, in the places where water is like it, I'm going to use a bigger word like perennial, but basically means it's changing. It's not the same. And so there's a dry season and a wet season. And so it's hard sometimes here if you live in a place and it's like, oh, this is a lake and it's always a lake, or this is a river. It's always a river. But in a bunch of places in Eastern Southern Africa, and West Africa as well, the standing water really changes. So when we say wet and dry season there, like things dry up.
Right.
And that's what you were saying. So absolutely, hippos have for centuries and millennia probably had to contend with these changes. And that's probably one of the things that controls their population, because again, they respond so much to the environmental conditions. So that's important. So that means that they're in sync with nature. Right. So the water conditions change. That also means the grass conditions change. And so hippo populations are regulated or in sync with the environmental conditions.
Mother Nature.
Yeah. In Colombia, the waters never dry up. The grass is never not green, right? That it's a very different environment. And so there is nothing to control the population there. And you could think, oh, that's a good thing, except that they are not native. And so we don't think of invasive species this way. Like we think of invasive species maybe as like Argentine ants, like red fire ants, or people heard about like murder hornets or something that's not supposed to be there. But hippos are like that in Colombia. They're not supposed to be there. And we don't know now that they're having a negative impact on any of those species that I mentioned that rely on the Magdalena River. But if I were, someone who had spent their life protecting the West Indian manatee, I might be worried.
So what is their predator? What's the predator for the hippos in Africa? So who's their predator?
Like many large animals, like rhinos and elephants and hippos, we kind of put them in that category because they're so big.
Right.
Humans are the primary predator.
Okay. So,
which isn't to say, because people do hunt them.
Right. They do. I didn't know that.
They do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In a lot of places, people eat hippos, and hippos are. I've never eaten a hippo, but I've heard that they're delicious. Yeah, they're delicious. They're pretty easy to kill, and that's a lot of meat, a lot of food, and tends to be. They have a pretty big fat layer, so like pigs, like that's yummy to people.
Oh, they don't taste like chicken?
I don't think again, I don't have personal experience here, but I don't think so.
I don't want it either.
Yeah. But so, and it's thousands of pounds of meat and you can kill them and they're sitting right there. So there are some pockets in Africa where there's taboos against eating hippos, but in general, I think hippos have been a source of food. There are some predation events where lions can take hippos for different reasons. It's pretty it's the same thing with elephants. You'll sometimes see and it's mostly younger ones or smaller ones or sicker ones, but it's not that common. So similarly with rhinos and elephants. So it happens, but the primary predator for all of those really large animals are people.
So if you've got that, and basically the way the population is controlled, aside from the encroachment of humans, is the weather and humans maybe shooting you or whatever. So when you go to Colombia, they don't have, nobody's eating hippos down there, I'm sure of that. And they don't have anything else.
There's nothing controlling their population. And I will say that I think Colombians have welcomed hippos, which is wonderful. But I don't want people to be hunting hippos, but we're just recognizing we are headed towards an even bigger problem because there will just be more and more hippos, and they do move. There's nothing limiting their movement now. In East Africa, they tend to be somewhat controlled by where there's fresh water, where those resources are, the water resources. There isn't. So they're moving way more than we ever have seen hippos move anywhere on Earth.
Well, so we used the term when you and I talked the other day as a perfect storm. So you've got the perfect storm. So one of the problems you have, and let's get into that a little bit, is sterilization. So and there's a lot of problems being able to do that. If you think about the wild horses, I know I'm repeating myself to you, but for you guys listening, wild horses, they have a big sterilization program that they do, each year. The hippos, well, let's go into that. Why? I mean, if you want to control them, keep them at 200.
Yeah. Why can't you do it?
Right.
Why can't it happen? And this gets back to some of these mysteries of hippos that we still haven't really unraveled. And there is hippo birth control. I'll just say that the Disney Animal Kingdom, which has one of the largest captive facilities in the U.S., has done an amazing job of developing birth control, but it's for females, and they basically have to get it regularly. And that works if you have a captive
controlled environment.
If you control the environment, you can get the hippo, but it doesn't work if you're trying to do something in the wild. Being able to capture a single hippo once is heroics and really, really, really hard. And so we don't have a chemical way. We don't have a surgical way. There's no obvious way to stop that population growing other than removal. And I know nobody wants that. And I don't want that. But the challenge is we don't have a lot of options. Again, I love the idea of people saying, but we want to find homes for them. I want to find homes for them too. The challenge is that most captive facilities, zoos, right, that can take a hippo, because having a hippo in captivity is extremely challenging.
Economics too.
Economics, right? You have to have, if you're going to keep it, and this is going to be it has to be a big area. They move, right? They need water. They need an incredible filtration system. They eat hundreds of pounds of stuff a day. It's expensive. It requires a lot of equipment. And there's most of the places that want a hippo and can handle a hippo and afford a hippo have a hippo. So what can we do with them? I know there's excitement about potentially making a reserve for them that is in situ. So that means in nature. So it would be if people have been to safari parks, or if San Diego has a safari park, but there's other places too. So it would be an in nature, but it would be enclosed. So that's certainly a possibility. But think about how that's great, but that still will take a lot of money and a lot of maintenance, because if they somehow manage to round them all up, which in and of itself is very, very hard, but let's just say they could do it, and they put them all in one place. amazing. That'll be like this hippo sanctuary.
Right.
That requires like amazing fences and gullies that keep hippos in place. So if you think about like what happens at a zoo where they have like big areas that around enclosures, you need that. And it would have to be pretty big.
Well, it'd have to be real big.
Yeah.
And I know, so a couple things before my mind goes everywhere. I apologize.
Yeah.
So one of the things we also talked about, if you want to tranquilize them to be able to tag them and that, there's a problem with it. One, they're sensitive to it. And the other one that you said is that they go in the water and they end up drowning because you can't, they're 9,000 pounds. What do you do?
Yeah. So it's when we think about, I mean, there's amazing animal, wildlife biology and wildlife biologists and resource managers who have developed incredible techniques to safely handle wild animals and inject. Sometimes they're injecting them with vaccines if there's a disease outbreak. And so we have a lot of technology to do that. Most of that doesn't work on hippos. And we don't really understand why. Like, why can't we use the medicine that we use to anesthetize and sedate an elephant doesn't work on a hippo. They're very, very sensitive, and it has something to do with their physiology, with their insides that we don't really understand. So, yeah, and the challenge, of course, is so let's say you dart an elephant, and then what do? You just wait, and it will fall down and go to sleep or become sedated. But for hippos, they get scared, and oftentimes they'll run right back to the water, which means it's potentially in danger. And of course, no wildlife biologist will ever do anything to put an animal in danger. And so, and so it's really, really hard. And it's not for lack of trying. It's not for lack of smarts. It's honestly just a lack of, we just don't know enough about them, and how to help them in the way we want to. And it comes down to just the gaps that we have in our knowledge about hippos. So
they've never been successfully tagged, and you can't put a collar on because they don't have a neck. I think that's just
they don't have a neck. I know. It's something that, again, if you've seen some wild animal shows, you say, oh, well, there's collars, right? And a collar is just something that goes around your neck, and that it tracks them, and they have tracking with satellites, and it can be real, and you can track animals, and so we can do that. So people ask, well, why don't you just do that with hippos? But as we were just saying, hippos don't have a neck. Their head is attached, obviously, to the rest of their body, but when they open their mouths and they have a huge gape, that is their neck. They're using that. And so they don't have that to be able to do that. So there's one technology that has been developed that doesn't work for them. We've also looked into, can we adapt? We just talked about that they're related to whales. Can we adapt some of the tracking and telemetry devices that people develop for whales? For big whales, they often dart a telemeter that's sort of in a canister, and that whales are so big you can do that. Right. Unfortunately, that would really, really severely injure a hippo. Another way that they sometimes put tracking devices on whales is by tagging something on a suction cup. But for hippos that are constantly in vegetation or rolling around in the mud, they'll knock it off. So again, great ideas, but the technology isn't there for hippos.
So for you guys listening, we have to solve this problem. We have to figure that. I know you have to think outside of the box and figure this thing out. We really need to do that. I'm now, it's been ever since you and I talked, it's been in my mind, okay, I know I can figure this out. I want to figure this out because I know we can.
I love it. I hope people are inspired just to realize, most people think oh, well, there's no, what animal could I study? Or I love animals and I want to learn something new or help solve a problem. And you think, well, everything's been studied. We know everything. But
no, we don't.
As you were saying before, we absolutely don't. And hippos have been so understudied relative to elephants and rhinos. There's so much we don't know about them. Really, really basic things. And what that, you could get depressed by that, but you could also, as you were just saying, see this as an opportunity. Right. There's so many discoveries to make.
So for you guys listening, so in April of this year, Colombia passed a law where they were going to euthanize, I think, 80 of them, and the country freaked out. everybody goes, no way, we're not doing that. So they're now not doing that, and that's where this preserve idea came up. And so again, why we have to figure out this challenge is how can you keep that 100 or 200 or whatever the magic number is where it's there. They're not going back to Africa. They're too big. It's too hard to transport. So there's babies in barn nests. So they're Colombian hippos now. At the end of the day, that's what it is. So now we have to figure out how to keep them healthy and how to keep all the other animals healthy as well.
Absolutely. And, what I hope is that I know that's the thing that's been putting hippos in the news. So we haven't been hearing about hippos in Africa to the same extent. Obviously, we don't have that type of crisis, but I am hoping that just the no press is bad press is that for hippos, it just means that they're part of the conservation conversation. And what people actually learn about them is how, that they're losing habitat in Africa, that their populations are declining, that pygmy hippos are critically endangered, and that we really need, both in Colombia, but in the native range as well, to do more to protect hippos, to make sure that people and hippos can live sustainably. Because one of the challenges, and this is huge in West Africa, if you think about if you were going to be a farmer, if you were going to put a farm somewhere in Africa and farm something, maybe it's rice if you're in West Africa, or corn in other places, you'd put your farm right next to some water,
right? Because
your crops need water. And so turns out that a lot of the places where people put their farms, there's hippos there. So guess what hippos do? They're like, I'm not going to eat grass. You crazy? I'm going to go eat rice. I'm going to go eat corn. I'm going to go eat whatever you're growing. Yeah. And so hippos are crop raiders. And that's one of the reasons that humans and hippos have conflict. And again, we're both after fresh water. So coming up with sustainable solutions is both about protecting hippos and protecting sustainable livelihoods for people as well. And that's the way we need to think about it. But I'm hoping that just having hippos in the news and in the story gets people thinking about hippo conservation across, not just in Colombia, but in their native range as well.
So for people that are listening, and I'm going to talk about conservation now. What can people do to help support that? What, other than being educated, what other things can people do? I mean, is there funding that you guys are still? Every person I've ever talked to that's in the
who doesn't need that.
For funding. Yeah. But what can people do that are listening now to help support that and want to know more, or whatever it is? What would you tell everybody?
There are lots of organizations. What we don't have for hippos is a really centralized organization like the African Wildlife Foundation, which is just African Elephant Foundation, which is just focused on elephants. We don't have a very established organization like that for hippos because they just haven't been on the radar. But there are lots of organizations that are working to support hippo conservation. And those, you can support them. I think even working with, if you live in a town that has a zoo, I'm in San Diego. We have incredible San Diego Zoo, right?
Yeah, you're a pretty big zoo.
Cleveland, Cincinnati, there's lots of people who live in a town with a zoo. I would say reach out to the zoo and say, as a community, we want to do more, because oftentimes it's zoos that can really pull in enough support to then work and support a project in Africa. And again, I know that hippos in Colombia are on a lot of people's minds, and I'm very sensitive to that as well. But hippo conservation in Africa really needs support and attention. And that's where they're supposed to be. Right. That's where they've evolved to live. And so I definitely think that going through, your local zoo and letting them know how much you care about hippos, you can start a hippo campaign and say, we want to do more. We want to do it with you in partnership, because most of the zoos in the United States have support conservation projects. Mm-hmm. They find partners. They are often the glue that brings a lot of individual projects together. And I think together we can do so much more than just individual organizations or individual projects here and there. So I think that's a great pathway. And, if you are like my kids, we were at the zoo all the time because they love animals and they're just wanting to learn more. So they can be really great entry points for folks who haven't been to Africa.
Well, I tell you, the San Diego Zoo, what an amazing spot that is. It's amazing. It really is.
Yes.
So before we get to the joke,
Yes.
if people want to learn about hippos, where would you point them to?
There's incredible resources online. The Hippo Specialist Group, we have a website, but there's so many. And that's the thing that I think gives me a lot of hope, because I do think people love hippos. You know, there's children's books, and maybe people read George and Martha. I've got like every stuffed hippo that's been given to my family over the years. But I think people love hippos, and there's such an opportunity to learn more and to really make a difference by getting involved in hippo conservation. And I'm just excited for people to learn both what we don't know, but to recognize how important they are for the environments in which they live. And again, to think of themselves like we're like hippos. Hippos need fresh water just like us. And so if we want to have a future for hippos, I think we're also thinking about a sustainable future for people.
Well, and for guys that are listening, I'll get some links and stuff from you that maybe you suggest in the description that's there. So we're at that point now where we're going to tell the animal joke. And the good news is, and by the way, before we get there, as I always tell everybody, if you want to tell a joke, I always welcome guests, and I was able to beg these guys to come on today. But you can always email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. And if you got ideas for the show, or if you've got kids, or you want to tell a joke in the show, you're going to get to do it like these real famous guys. So everybody, please welcome Peyton and Naomi Lewis, and they've got some really cool hippo jokes. And I'll let you guys take it over. What's your jokes, guys?
Hey, Mark. My joke is, what do you call a hippo that always thinks he's sick?
Go, Becca, you try that one.
Oh, I think I have a guess. Can I guess?
Yeah.
Is it a hypochondriac?
Yes, that would be
right,
it.
good
That's
one.
a good one.
Okay, Naomi.
What do you call a one-legged hippo?
Becca?
I don't know if I can guess that one.
A hoppo.
Oh, I love it.
Good one. Great one, guys. I'm so glad you guys came on, because trust me, when I tell jokes, they're the worst jokes ever. Anyway, to finish up,
Thank you.
I want to first thank you girls there. Stay on for a bit. And Becca, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. You're wonderful. I'm so much appreciative of you being on.
I love talking hippos, and I hope this inspires other folks to learn more hippo jokes, because those are some good ones. And we need more hippo humor, and we need more hippo heroes. I'm just hoping that people really are inspired to learn more about hippos and conservation of hippos.
Well, again, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And then for everybody else who's out there listening, as I always say, without you guys, I don't get cool guests in, and I certainly don't get cool comedians like we had today. And just keep following the show, pass it out, tell other people about it, follow us, do all that weird stuff. And again, you can always email me with ideas or questions at mkyleforrealpodcast.com. But more importantly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.